From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Stick. I mean, wasn't it? Who was it that Dewey Lineberry in Wilson County ran
He changed
for
his name
sheriff
officially
to be the law dog? Do you remember?
He changed his name.
He did not win. I believe Sheriff Ash maintained the hold on that. Now it's Sheriff Robert Bryan out there, and it's good to have you on.
Thank
How are
you. Happy to be here.
How's your March Madness bracket?
I don't have one anymore.
You and me both.
Wow.
It was not good, not good.
How about the women's bracket? I mean, if you have Connecticut, you can go home, but the rest of it, think about it.
Come on.
How bad is that?
The Connecticut's so good.
Yeah.
And I saw there was a sports, and we don't want to get too much on sports, but he's a sports buff like I am. I mean, did you see where there was a columnist who said Connecticut's so good it's making women's basketball bad? Which you could have said at some point. There were years under Pat Summitt, the UT basketball team was so good. And I never thought of it that way. I think it's great. UT, when they were dominant, was awesome with Pat Summitt. And I'm sorry, but the same is to be said about Connecticut.
Yeah, and I saw their coach. He said that, you know, well, golf wasn't bad when Tiger was so good, and I think that's true. You got to get better. I mean, you can't, but it's not as fun to watch when there's really, you're just playing for second.
It's a foregone conclusion. I mean, no one's going to beat them.
No.
It'd be an enormous upset. Anyway, the phone line's going to be open. We can talk about that if you'd like, but I thought I'd touch bases with you on a number of things going on. I wanted to bring this up, and I'm not sure if you're going to have any involvement in this because neither of the suspects are incarcerated. They're on bond, but I'm sure you're aware that next Monday is the beginning of the Vanderbilt rape trial ×2. They're going to be starting jury selection this week, which we'll be covering in Chattanooga, which will be brought here. And do your deputies, are they involved with delivering the jurors to and from the hotel, or is that all court staff?
Yeah, we usually do that. Normally we work with the court officers that are assigned to the judges, and we assist them and help them. So far they haven't really asked for, usually it's about transportation.
Yeah, isn't it one of the buses? What are they going to use? Or
they got vans, I think, going down to Chattanooga and coming back, and then what we're going to do here, we'll work with them whatever they need. But typically we've worked security in the hotels and done various things over the years, but it's really up to the judge. I mean, he has 6 or she has 6 court officers, and if they can handle that, they do it themselves. But historically, we've always helped out.
Okay, and I was wondering, and this is Judge Monty Watkins, and so when they're at the hotel, and of course the media coverage, we do not want to harass, bother, or show the jurors in any way. We won't. But it's usually at some undisclosed hotel location. But the key there is monitoring them, and most jurors, of course, most of the time, not last trial, of course, that's why we're doing this all over again. A juror was not completely forthcoming, but most of the time they abide by it. But when you say security at the hotel, they're supposed to stay in there. They're not supposed to be watching TV, reading newspapers. How much do your guys or the women that work it monitor them to make sure they're abiding by this? I mean, they're in their rooms.
It's really not that as much as it is protecting them from and making sure that they know that and it's really the hallways and making sure that they don't interfere or interact with other people. But it's really not monitoring their behavior as much. It's and I saw the thing the other night about the OJ. It was that story over again, and I didn't realize 280 something days sequestered.
Was that what it was? Now I missed that. Is that what they were saying in the OJ trial? That's crazy. Of course, that was the trial of the century, I guess. And
but still, I mean,
you're away from home almost a year.
Yeah. How do you live? And that's just not the way. I mean, you can't read, you can't watch, you can't. I mean, that's just a. And I heard one of the jurors speaking. At some point, it doesn't matter. We want it over. And how good of a jurist can you be if you're in that frame of mind? So. You need to respect everyone, and I hope, like I said, this one and you got folks coming from out of town, you got other things, and it's just an inconvenience, and it needs to be handled right. So I hope they can be swift and make it as painless as possible.
Yeah, I'm thinking a week, maybe. A week is best case scenario, I would think. But is it not true also? They try to make it as pleasant to stay as possible. I don't know, sometimes they've been known, I don't know if your deputies have taken them out to a restaurant where they have a back room set up for them, or sometimes on a weekend or an evening when they're having to stay over, they go to a movie.
Yeah.
Does that happen sometimes?
Yeah, over the years that's happened. It's usually the judge is kind of directing everybody,
right.
but yeah, we've done some unique things to help kind of break the monotony of that. And again, you're talking about a hotel room and without television and newspaper, and today it's electronic devices. I mean, keep in mind back then it was a paper. Yeah, right now.
So do they have to give up their phones, I would think, and then just make landline calls from the hotels? Not that they can't do phone calls with loved ones, but
yeah, my experience is that the judge orders them not to use them. I mean, because clearly you have children and other things you might still want to communicate with, but it's up to the judge, and they'll give that instruction. And I suspect it'll mean you just can't use it for purposes other than to communicate with, checking on an emergency or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of people ask me about being on a jury, and it's a really neat experience.
Have you been on one?
No, I've been listed 3 years ago.
Have you? You were called, but never. Yeah. I've never been. I would love to.
Me too. Me too. I would love to.
But what's interesting is, just as you said, in the sequestered case, as it'll be here, you're all day with these jurors you're thrown in with that you probably didn't know before you were selected and put together, and then when you go back to the hotel for the evening, you're not allowed to talk about anything you've seen that day amongst yourselves. You can only do that when you're in the courthouse and deliberations. But so you're sharing a common experience all day long, listening to everything in trial.
Right.
But then when you go back to the hotel room, if you want to talk amongst each other, what do you have in common? Well, it's the trial. You're not allowed to talk about it. So how's the kids? What's the weather? Any movies you like? Follow sports? I guess that's about it, right?
Right. And like you said, you can't communicate about it with anyone else, and it's taking over your life. There's so many questions going on, and I've, of course, in this job, you get sued and a lot of things happen, and it's also interesting on the other side. I mean, we had a case just a few months back that was it's a class action case about pay and so forth for the staff, and so there's a jury set, and you spend 2 weeks is a federal case, and but it's an interesting thing to watch. I mean, you're involved, your lawyers are helping select the jury, and then they're put together, and it's just fascinating how all that really works. And the general public, they love to watch you guys. I know, there's gavel to gavel, because it's an inviting thing for people to watch.
I think a lot of people, maybe more this time, will be watching. One last thing, I don't want to spend too much time just on this, but I know many of you are going to be following the trial as well at home, but it's interesting. Now, Vandenberg and Beatty were, for a period of time, incarcerated at the jail, awaiting sentencing before this whole issue came up with the jury foreman, where they ordered a new trial because he wasn't completely forthcoming with all his background information. Now, during that time that Beatty was incarcerated, he did an interview with Dr. Phil, which was completely legit. You told me about that when it happened, and now, in light of that, talking to Nick Leonardo, that interview is going to be an issue for him. He testified on his own behalf the first time around. This time they don't think he'll be able to do that because they'll bring up things he told Dr. Phil. And I'm just curious, at that time they basically made the request of you if it's okay, and as long as he signed off, how did that all go down? Yeah,
and it was really interesting because his attorney, of course we work through his attorney, our director of communications communicates directly with the attorneys anytime there's a request. The issue that was a bit unique in this one is that the attorney said yes, and we're not so sure that the client knew yet, because it's up to the client, not the attorney in the end. But
he could have still said no once the attorney went to him. But the attorney kind of agreed to it, that maybe thinking, well, I don't know. I mean, in retrospect, it was probably not the best move.
Right. And I had, as a matter of fact, our communications folks were talking about. We had a conversation during that time, and I remember them saying they didn't think it was a very good idea for him to do it, and I was actually on the other side at the time. I was thinking, well, what is it going to hurt? It's over now, and he needed to. It's therapeutic in a way. But look what happened. Who would have known?
I know they never dreamt that this would happen. All he had remaining was an appeal, which I don't think would have gone anywhere. So maybe from their perspective, I don't know what he had to gain by going public like that. But it certainly now is costing him, in my opinion. I don't think it's in his benefit with this happening now.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, I've sat through some other types of cases, interviews and over the years, but I've never sat through one like that. And I was pretty intrigued by the interview, and really even Beatty. I think, in full disclosure, I know him away from work. My son played sports with him from the time we against him, if you will. So I wasn't close to him, but kind of followed him through the sports world, and he I was pretty amazed with the interview. There's a lot that went into that. Of course, you're watching it behind the scenes. It's a big theatrical show with Dr. Phil, but I don't know. I was pretty intrigued with the way that it all played out. Now, that's not from the legal perspective, because I do see where some stuff that came out.
Maybe some. I got to be honest with you. To me, watching it, I was intrigued as well, but I didn't see a ton that was like, oh, because he testified. We heard a lot of it already in court, to be honest with you. And I got to say, though, the circumstances of this were, like you said, just very unusual, because no one, I've done an awful lot of exclusive jailhouse interviews, many over at your jailhouse. I've never seen one come back and bite someone in the butt like this, potentially. After the fact, but no one dreamt that they'd be ordering a new trial. So, all right, that's enough on that. We've got other things to talk about as well, and we'll take your phone calls, 737-7587. Questions about the jail, the role of the sheriff's department, what they do in this town. Broad questions for the sheriff you'd like, and anything maybe you want to bring up, we'll do that. We'll be right back with more right after this. Stay with us.